Poplar Springs believe in strengthening families. And I love it when families come together to church. I love it when I see fathers bring in their family to church with their mother and with parents, grandparents, and children all together. And it's great when you hear a child say, I want to be like Daddy. I want to be like Mama. And when they say that, it's because they see that their daddy has a cool job, and I want to be a policeman like Dad. I want to be a fireman like Dad, or I want to be a businessman like Dad, or I want to be a nurse like Mother. I want to be a teacher like my mother or father. I want to be a businesswoman like my mother. And those traits are good, and I love to hear children say that. But I want to give us a challenge today that our children want to be like us for a different reason. But I love it when children say, I want to be like Dad. I remember when my son was around 2 years old, I believe he had a thought that he might want to be a preacher one day. And so after church on a Sunday night, we were finished with the service and everybody was standing in the sanctuary talking, and Scott, as a 2-year-old, climbed up on the pulpit, pulled himself up, and he was hanging onto the pulpit. He leaned over into the mmicrophone and he started preaching as loud as he could preach. And he didn't know, and nobody knew, that the sound system was still on. And everybody, it was so loud, and it just shocked everybody, and everybody stopped what they were doing. They turned around and looked at this 2-year-old preaching through the microphone, and it scared him. And at that point, he let go and fell and busted his head on the pulpit. We ended up in the emergency room, taking him to the emergency room. He had put stitches in his forehead. I still remember that night of having to hold him down while the doctor was sewing up his head. From that day forward, he never wanted to be a preacher again. And that was okay with me, because I feel like to be a minister, you need to be called by God, not by a parent. And there are too many preachers out there that are called by mamas and daddies, or they just want to be a preacher instead of God calling them. But it goes for every child, that every child has to understand that God has a plan for them. And that plan could be a nurse, a doctor, a lawyer, a fireman, a policeman, a businessman or woman, because God needs Christians in all of those. But I do believe that Scott did take some traits from me. For instance, I love to read books, and I have a great love for literature. Scott does that. He loves books. He's actually working on his PhD in English literature. He teaches English. He teaches literature to college students. So I believe he took that love of books from me. I also believe another trait that he took from me is that he's brilliant, and he got his brilliance from me. Well, not really. I think he got his brilliance from his mother. Everybody knows Becky. That's where he got his brilliance from. But I see some other traits of me and Scott, and that is how he loves his family and how he takes care of his family. For instance, he is really laid back. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get impatient with his son, Finn. He treats his wife with love and kindness. But another trait that I'm really proud of is that I see my son taking his family to church. 2 weeks ago when we were in Tennessee, we were able to go to church with them and to see him take his family to church. And that brings me to this verse of Scripture. In Ephesians 5:1 says, Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave Himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. My challenge to you is, let your children want to be like you, because you are a godly man and a godly woman. When you are an imitator of God and you're walking in the love of Christ, that's what I want to hear children say. I want to be like my mother. I want to be like my father, because they love God and they have that strong Christian character and they walk in the love of Christ. So that's my challenge. Will you be an imitator of God?